Your house is worth whatever it's worth, right? Whoever sells it. Wrong. I'm Charlie. Welcome to Moving Home with Charlie, and thank you for coming.
Charlie Landing grew up in Sussex, is the founder of Best Agent and presenter of Moving Home with Charlie.
If you want to find one of these guys, look out for those compassionate professionals. All estate agents are not the same.
So Charlie, what would be your advice for people interested in buying new builds right now?
Don't overpay. Do buy, but don't overpay. That's why I say disregard the guff. Read into the numbers and look, and it's buried. The bad news is buried in the small print, okay?
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Property Press Awards.
They may or may not be telling the truth, but you should form your own view. Get out and view, get out and view, get out and view. You cannot be in a position to make offers and have the offers accepted if you're not viewing. So be out there viewing. Pay attention to the back of the class if you've not been watching my videos. I did one just a couple of days ago. Disregard the guff, guys. Quiet slurp. Welcome everybody. This is an unscheduled live stream because this matter is burning a hole in my head. As someone who has dedicated my career to trying to bring about a reduction and ultimately an end to homelessness and a home for everyone, watching the breathtaking wholesale incompetence by government, successive governments, that's making the homelessness problem worse through misguided policies intended to make tenants more secure, but actually doing the opposite. I can't leave it. I can't let it lie. Now, I don't expect this video is going to change anything, but I need to put it out there so that people understand. I don't care about landlords, right? If you choose to be a landlord, that's a choice you've taken and you're a grown up and maybe it works out for you, maybe it doesn't. And I don't care about landlords. Because being a landlord is a choice. Being a tenant, on the other hand, is often not a choice. You have no choice. You're going to rent a home. If you need your own home, you're going to have to rent it if you can't buy it. And this is particularly true of the most vulnerable, financially vulnerable people in the country. Currently, official homelessness numbers are rising at around about 1,000 families a month, or 1,000 households, 1,000 extra households a month going into temporary accommodation, which we, the taxpayers, are paying for. So leaving to one side how it destroys the lives of those tenants being put into temporary accommodation through no fault of their own, it's bad for councils, it's bad for the taxpayer, it's bad for society, it's bad for everyone. We are seeing the results of 7 years of bad policies, and apparently no one taking any time to go, there's now hard evidence in there that these policies are backfiring. Perhaps we should reconsider them. No, Labour's planning to double down on the policies. Now, should Section 21 evictions be abolished, or should they be amended? Because Section 21's evictions being abolished is one of the top cited reasons for landlords selling up. Now, I know that when a landlord sells a house, the house is still there and another landlord can buy it. I don't have a problem with landlords selling up in principle, because either another landlord buys it and it gets rented out, or a first-time buyer or home buyer buys it and someone moves in. There's no problem in principle, except for the collateral damage that nobody that I can find, and please, if you are someone that agrees with me, let me know, nobody seems to care about the extra 1,000 families a month being pushed into temporary accommodation, pushed into homelessness. I put a big post rant about this out on X and on YouTube at the end of last week, saying that apparently Little Britain cares more about seeing landlords hurt and punished than it does about seeing tenants protected. which is in itself a tragedy if that's what this country has become. We care more about seeing people that we're jealous of because they've apparently got money hurt than we do about innocent people getting hurt, right? It's just I find that a despicable attitude. Oh, well, it's an acceptable cost of what has to happen. Well, what has to happen? What is it that we actually want to happen? Don't we want more affordable, secure homes for tenants? Yeah. Well, if that's what we want, the opposite is happening. So I support the modification of regulations in the rented sector to protect tenants from bad landlords, but punishing all landlords because of the actions of a minority of bad landlords is demonstrably fucking stupid. I'm sorry. I'm doing my best to remain calm here, but I find this very, very difficult to stay calm about because it is so incalculably stupid. I'm going to show you by the way, none of this is my opinion. This is all verifiable fact. And in the link below this video, I've put a link to the government homelessness figures. It doesn't just show you the figures, it confirms that the number one reason for the rise to record homelessness is landlords selling up. And we've also this week got a report out saying that up to half of all landlords are either selling up or planning to sell up. Okay, now, if a landlord is bad, if they exploit their tenants, or if they don't look after the property, that landlord should be dealt with, and they should either remedy the problem or they should be banned from being a landlord. I agree with that entirely. But most landlords are good landlords, and I define a good landlord as someone who has a happy tenant. If the tenant is happy in the property, happy with the property, happy with the rent they're paying, and has no prospect of being moved out, that landlord is making the world a better place for their tenant. Those landlords are getting punished as well and being forced to sell up. And the silly thing is that forcing a landlord to sell up isn't even punishing them. They just take their money out of that and put it somewhere else. So there is no punishment. And for those people crowing and going, well, they're all greedy parasites and they deserve to be, they're not being punished. They're not being hurt. They're just being motivated to sell up and leave the sector. To understand this, how do we get here? It became too easy for amateurs to become landlords. It became too easy to borrow money to become a landlord. And that led to a rise in the number of bad landlords and a rise in the amount of reporting of bad landlords. But 7 years ago, and I use the quotes term with irony, homelessness charity Shelter started lobbying against landlords. Let me start with this is a blog post from 7 years ago that I will share with you. So you can see the history of this, because you need to understand what's happening. So this is a blog post from a website called Property 118, dated 12th of February 2017, so 7.5 years ago, right? Where, amongst other things, it says, Shelter run campaigns throughout the year, especially at Christmas, which tug at the heartstrings. They focus on homeless children and young homeless girls who often end up in difficult predicaments with sexual predators. They raise millions, but to my knowledge, none of it is actually spent on housing such people in property owned by Shelter. That's correct. And last year, they spent £82 million as charity. Shelter support the restrictions on the finance cost relief for individual landlords. This is the first step against landlords, and I'll tell you what the other ones are in a minute. And Shelter completely ignore the overwhelming evidence that this will cause rental inflation and an increase in homelessness. Okay, so they were told, Shelter was told and warned, and so was the government warned, that these policies would lead to rents rising faster and would lead to homelessness going up. Let's have a look at those claims. Let's have a look at rent. So this is the ONS. This is September 2024's ONS rental private index or price index of private rentals. Okay, and back here, 2017. Okay, and annual rent inflation was about 2.5%, 2.4%, and it came down. It got down as low as 0.8%, and then it sort of went up a bit and then came down a bit, staying around about 2% level. And then August 2021, which by the way is when the changes to tax relief finished coming in. There they are, phased in between 2017 and 2021. Okay. In 2021, private rent inflation started to go to the moon, reaching 9.2% in March of this year. And at the same time, this is also a government page, homelessness started to rise. In about 2022, it was gradually rising already, started to rise more sharply. Okay, and it went up, and that was a year ago. And in the last year, it's risen 12%, according to the government's own data. Increase of 12% in the last year. Okay. And this is, again, the government. I've linked to this below for anyone who wants to see it. And here is the smoking gun, the hard, cold fact evidence that this policy has led to an record increase in homelessness. The majority of households owed a homelessness prevention duty due to their tenancy ending, were due to the landlord wishing to sell or relet the property at 68%. Okay. Now, it's not just that the tax relief happened. Right? That's where the first blow was the tax relief. The second thing was the threat, which came in during the last government, of Section 21 being abolished. That was supposed to happen before the election, and it didn't happen. This accelerated the number of landlords selling up. Why? Because landlords said, if that law goes through, I will not be able to get back possession of my property. Now, I'm not saying that is a good or a bad thing. I'm saying that's the explanation, right? Landlords are like, a lot of them are like, if I want to get the property back, I'd like to be able to get it back. And with the removal of Section 21 evictions, I won't be able to get it back. So I'm out. They don't want to lose their investment effectively. So that's the second thing. The third thing is that we've now got the EPCs, the EPC regulations apparently coming in that means that you will not be able to rent a property out unless its EPC energy performance certificate is a C or better, C, B, or A. And a vast majority, I think something like 40% of the country's rented stock is not that. I could be wrong about that. That's just from memory. So 40% of private renters' property will have to either have a lot of money spent on it or be sold. And then one final thing is capital gains tax, which is expected in the October budget. I have no opinion on whether it's coming or not, but it is widely believed there are going to be capital gains tax increases that will hit landlords and second property owners as capital gains tax increases. So there are more and more people looking to sell up. Now, I can hear you saying, oh, boo-hoo, Charlie, boo-hoo, we don't care about the landlords. This isn't my problem. I don't care. It doesn't matter that landlords are selling up, other than the fact it's become the number one cause of rents going up and homelessness going up. Okay? And that affects us all. Both of those things affect us all because it affects the economy as well. Now, I always say that if you want to criticize a policy, you've got to have a suggestion to what would we do differently. These are just basic ideas of what could be done differently. That's not going to happen. I'm wasting my breath. But just so you understand that cheering government policies is like cheering unnecessary homelessness. Right? If you're someone that's like, yeah, landlords are selling up, woohoo, they're not losing. They're just moving their investments elsewhere. The only people losing are their tenants. And apparently, many of you think that that's an acceptable price to pay just to get the greedy landlords out. Where do you think? Okay, and some of you go, oh, they're going to get replaced by corporate landlords. Now, this is not the video we can get into discussion about the pros and cons of corporate versus private landlords. A good private landlord is the best option. Yes, it's true that corporate private landlords won't be selling up, and therefore the tenants won't be at risk of being moved out. If that's your worry, why are you supporting the current legislation that's getting tenants to be forced out? Right? But if your worry is for the vulnerable, who are demonstrably the most seriously impacted of all, okay, then being a corporate tenant, a tenant of a corporate landlord, is going to be horrible, because you won't be able to speak to a human who can listen to your circumstances and make a decision on compassionate grounds. Corporation is the opposite of compassion, literally the opposite. So vulnerable tenants of corporate landlords are going to be worse off than if they were with the average private landlord. Now, I want to make something clear here. I have publicly criticized what I've called the Instagram landlords, right? The TikTok landlords, these awful people. And they really are awful people who love to grandstand about their Lamborghini, the Lambo landlords that they're now getting because of how much money they're making out of rent. Yet they don't have the Lambos on finance, and they don't have the money to repair the property. Like that. What's his name? That celebrity. He's the TV presenter of Catchphrase. And his tenants were living in worsening damp conditions. He did nothing about it. And now he's apologized because it's come out because the Big Issue did an article on him. Right? Those kinds of landlords who try and blame the agent. Well, you chose the agent. You as the landlord are still responsible, right? Landlords who don't understand the extent of their responsibility of providing a long-term secure home to tenants, I agree. They're not good landlords and we shouldn't have them. And I'm happy to see those guys go, as long as it doesn't cause their tenants to become homeless. That's just a lose-lose for everybody. So what should happen rather than what they're planning to happen? A landlord should ultimately have the opportunity to get their property back, provided it is not at the expense of making somebody homeless. So my first suggestion about Section 21 amendments should be that if you're a landlord who would like to regain possession of your property, either because you want to live in it yourself or you want to sell it, then if the tenant is at no fault, they should have at least 6 months notice, not 2, right? 6 months notice is enough. But in addition to that, if it is the genuine case that the tenant of that property is unable to secure a new home, then as a landlord, and remember, you chose to be a landlord. Even accidental landlords chose to be landlords. Accidental landlords, generally people who wanted to sell but couldn't sell their property, mostly, not always, there are exceptions. An accidental landlord, you do have alternatives. You can sell at whatever the market's going to be, but there are people who say, well, I can't sell my house because of a negative equity, but renting is the only way I can pay the mortgage off. You still accept the responsibility when you accept a tenant that you are in the business of providing them with a secure, stable home, and you can't just kick them out when it suits you. And if that's not an acceptable risk, you shouldn't be a landlord, in my view. Okay? Choosing to be a landlord is choosing to provide someone with reliable accommodation. So, 6 months notice, but also if the council finds that tenant is going to become their problem because they genuinely can't find another place that they can afford to move into, and they're going to have to go to temporary accommodation, then the council should have the power to put an extension on that, to provide more time for that tenant to find a home. Because that, yes, the landlord still receives their rent, so you're not losing out financially. But if councils had the power to say, we are imposing an extension on this tenant's notice period, they still have to pay their rent. because otherwise they have to go to temporary accommodation, which costs the taxpayer, and it derails their life, and it's just bad for everybody, right? And if you're a landlord that can't accept that risk, you shouldn't be a landlord, in my view, okay? So anyone who thinks I'm just here on the landlord's side, I'm not. I'm on the side of people not being made homeless. That's the only side I'm on. Easy to move house, not being made homeless. Those are my basic goals of what I do in my career. I want it to be easy to move house. I want people to not be so badly turned over when they are moving house. And I want people to not be made homeless. I want people to not go into negative equity, and I want tenants to not be made homeless through no fault of their own. Okay, that's the only side that I'm on. Okay, what about all the bad landlords that are looking after their properties terribly? This is appalling and it should be dealt with very fast. And at the moment, the problem is, and the existence of Section 21 notice is why this is a problem and why it needs to be modified. Tenants who are suffering from properties with bad damp and mold and health problems and other issues are in fear of complaining in case the landlord decides to issue a Section 21 notice of eviction, giving them 2 months to get out. I understand that. That is a terrible situation, okay? The law should simply be changed that the landlord, once a fault with the property has been reported by the tenant, okay, and it's got to be a fault that's got to meet certain criteria, the landlord can't then issue the Section 21 notice. Not only that, I guarantee you that every landlord in the land would very, very quickly fix their properties up if the following rule was put into place. If a tenant reports so first of all, tenant says to the landlord by email in writing, I've got a problem with the rent. Here are the photographs with the damp. Here are the photographs. There's damp, there's mold. I've got proof. I've got a mold reading. There's mold in here. I'm putting you on notice as the landlord. There's a problem that you as the landlord have to fix. If the landlord doesn't fix that, they're not allowed to issue Section 21, number one. Number two, if they haven't fixed the problem and addressed and remedied that issue within, let's say, 90 days, a reasonable time, then at that point, the tenant is allowed to stop paying rent until the landlord fixes it. It's so simple. In any other service business, and as a landlord, you are in a service business, if a customer is paying you for a service and you're not providing the service, the customer is entitled to stop paying. Now, tenants don't do that because they're worried they're going to be evicted. But if the law was changed so that once a tenant has established a bona fide issue with the property to do with damp or mold or other things that make it unhealthy or dangerous, at that point, that tenant cannot be evicted. Okay? These are simple changes that don't require what's happening now, this massive, ridiculous sell-off. Because the bad landlords should be punished or should be so seriously incentivized that they do not allow their tenants to live in squalid conditions. So simple. Yeah. And if I was a tenant now, and that was my situation, that is what I would do. I would say to the landlord, how long would you like to fix this problem? I'd ask them, I'd say, look, you tell me what's reasonable. How long would you like to fix the problem? And if I didn't get an answer, I'd say, I'm now going to suggest that I'd like the problem fixed in 90 days. That's reasonable. And if you haven't fixed it in 90 days, then you'll be in breach of the tenancy agreement as a landlord because you're required to keep it up to certain standards with AWAB's law and that kind of stuff. I'm going to stop paying my rent. I don't know the legal ins and outs of that, and I don't know if that would stand up in court, so I'm not advising anyone does that. But that's what I would do. I would take my chances with that because if I was the landlord, I'd go, oh God, I'd rather they kept paying their rent. Even if as a landlord I did have the right to go to court and get you out, I'd rather you just kept paying your rent. So I'll probably just fix the issue. Some of you put some funny comments in there. Jim Bob says, I'm torn between compassion and greed. Thank you. Yeah. Someone says, when banks to the landlords, people will moan even more. I think that's true. I think that's true. Yeah. So, guys, that's it. I just wanted to say that be aware that shelter, the policies of the homelessness charity Shelter, are one of the biggest contributing factors to the fact that we've got homelessness now, right? And we've got this. For those of you who didn't see my video last week, Pauline Neat, the chief executive, is saying she's going to step down in March, and she's saying, "I joined Shelter because I know that an end to homelessness and housing insecurity in this country is not a well-founded and achievable reality." Well, not in the 7 years you've been there, Polly. And she's so grateful because you've achieved so much in my time here, championing that. But championing the building of more social homes, if only your lobbying had been as effective on getting that done as it was on getting landlords battered. Any questions for anyone on this, right? Because the people I got into debates with on X about this were just going, "Oh yeah, but landlords deserve it." Yeah, you might be right? The bad landlords deserve it. But what about the homeless people? What about the 1,000 extra homeless households every single month? Genuinely, you think that's an unavoidable cost of improving the situation? Because unless it's an unavoidable cost of improving the whole market, then it is an avoidable cost and we should avoid it. And right now, my concern is that this problem is going to get worse, much worse. 1,000 households a month being forced into temporary accommodation at the expense of the taxpayer is not a price worth paying. It is not a price worth paying just to chase landlords out of the sector to get a better deal for tenants. You get a better deal for tenants by enforcing existing regulations. That's it. And you can amend Section 21 to give tenants more security if they're good, but also give landlords more security if they've got an abusive tenant that's damaging the property willfully or causing problems to the neighbours or that kind of stuff. Landlords need to be able to reclaim their property from bad tenants just as quickly as tenants need to be able to get action taken against bad landlords. The system is crap. The current changes were proposed by people who know nothing about how the sector works, and all of us are paying the price because all of us have got local councils picking up the bill for temporary accommodation that's coming out of our tax payment, our tax money. Yeah. Parthipan Ganesamurthy says, people who damage the hotel room will need to pay for it. Yeah. Likewise, if tenants don't look after the property, then moan. Yeah. So if tenants don't look after the property, I agree. And they do have to pay for it. The tenant agreement covers that. Right? They do have to pay for damage to the property if they're damaging it. I quite agree with that. You know, like any other transaction in life, there are two parties to the transaction and both parties should be getting what they're supposed to get under the terms of that transaction. Okay. Tenant gets gets quality, healthy housing. Landlord gets money. That's the deal. But you know, I just it's so unnecessary and it's so avoidable and it's so dim-witted of people to think that what's happening now is good for anyone. Who's it good for? Does it make you feel better that landlords are selling up? Why? They haven't lost. They're going to put their money somewhere else now and get a better return. Is it just a feel-good factor because you're jealous of people who are landlords? What about the 1,000 families a month who are made homeless? Got to stop it, guys. Got to stop it. Now, Leslie Ann, that's a very good point. If the tenant is causing the mold and the condensation, absolutely, I agree. That is absolutely 100% something that is down to the tenant. And if the tenant is seen to have ignored the basic steps to prevent that, then yeah, of course, the landlord should be able to remove that tenant. Completely agree. Anyway, guys, I just need to get it off my chest. It's done now. But, you know, just because you hate landlords, it doesn't mean it justifies hurting tenants. And it is hurting tenants. There's no doubt. No one disputes it. The government data backs it up. This is hurting tenants. It's making people homeless. It's not solving the problem. If it was solving the problem, there would at least be an argument for it. Like, okay, unfortunate that thousands of people have been made homeless, but at least rents are coming down. At least tenants and landlords are improving their properties. But neither of those things are happening. right? So there is no upside for the current policies, which is why I don't understand how anyone with an ounce of intelligence between their ears thinks that what's happening now is good. It's not benefiting anyone. Rents are going up. Who's that benefiting? Landlords, you dipsticks. The remaining landlords are getting richer. So those of you who just don't think landlords should be able to get rich, what's happening now is making remaining landlords richer because rents are going up. Right, guys,